Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. This is certainly one of the busiest times of year for gardening and landscaping. As you're working around the yard or in the garden, there are questions that arise and you need to be on the lookout for certain pests and plant problems. So today we're going to get some answers to early season garden and landscape problems. Joining me are two frequent guests from UVM Extension and the university's Plant and Soil Science Department. It's a pleasure to welcome back Leonard Perry and Ann Hazelrig. Thanks so much for being here. Let's begin with you, Leonard, and the lovely lilacs that you've brought.
I wish we could just send the smell out there. It's
know,
just so wonderful.
amazing.
You know, you can just imagine. But yeah, I brought several types here just to show. Of course, the early lilacs are really two or three types. The early ones were pretty much gone by. You can see kind of the brown bits on the white flowers here. Then the later ones, the Preston types, bred by a person by that name, are coming out. And you see the difference. One of the reasons is the difference in leaves, more heart-shaped for the early ones and more elongated and thicker a bit for the Preston types. And then you have these real small-leaved ones, the Meyer type lilacs. So, and there's basically about 7 colors too.
Wonderful. So you received a question from one of our viewers. Elise from Stowe wants your advice on how best to care for cut lilacs.
That is a common question I get, and looking into it a little bit, it's really tough with these since they are a woody plant. But some of the keys are to keep them cool, cut early in the morning. Also cut, one of the real keys is to cut when they're not too open. A lot of people cut them at this stage.
Oh, I think you're supposed to wait till they're open.
No, and that's one of the problems. They only last a couple, 3 days. I tried it last week. But what you want, and then also using a preservative, using some lukewarm water. And another thing is removing all but the uppermost leaves. So as you see, this is too far open. This Meyer type, it's coming out maybe a third or half at most, but maybe a third. Some even like in this is Miss Canada, it's one of the late lilacs, just starting to open.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good stage. Remove most of these leaves off of here because those will just take up the water and the plant won't last as long. Maybe you'll get a week, you know, if you do all the right things there.
What happens if you don't have a preservative on hand?
Okay, preservatives are good, but if you don't have it on hand, some people use remedies like aspirin, pennies. Those don't really work. Some even recommend vodka. I think that's a pretty expensive preservative, and it doesn't really work that well. But a real simple one is lemon lime soda. 1 part of that, 3 parts of water, and a couple drops of bleach, say in a quart of water, and that helps keep the bacteria down. It gives sugars for the plant, acidic. Those are the things that the preservative needs. So real simple.
Excellent. Well, Ann, your job is to deal with the not so pretty problems, and you brought some examples here today, which I love. This is so interesting.
Yeah, and pretty is in the eye of the beholder. And if you're a plant pathologist, you think this is beautiful. So this is a disease that's out right now. In fact, my junipers are just bright orange with this disease. It's called cedar apple rust, and it's a gall. And each one of these little tentacles, tentacles are called spore horns, and spores are discharged out of these and they're carried on wind currents over to apple trees, and then they cause a bright yellow spot on apple trees. So it's they come out in May when it's rainy, just like the weather we've had, and they're pretty impressive looking.
So can you do anything about them?
Well, you can clip these out before they turn into these big orange spore horns. They look like little nutty brown galls. This is what they look like.
Oh, okay. Here's like a little, it's just like a little bump.
Right. So prune those out. You should plant your apple trees 2 miles away from these, which is hard in a neighborhood situation if you've got crab apples. There is a fungicide that you can use to protect your apple trees, but basically, clip them out and use a fungicide on the apples.
So you have another example of a problem that tends to show itself this time of year?
Well, all these are from my yard, and
that's not good.
This is what peonies look like right now in my yard, and this happens every year right around this time when we have this rainy, cool weather. The shoots are coming up, and all of a sudden they curl over and die like this, and then you can see these brown lesions on the stem with gray spores, and it's a fungal disease.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, it's a fungal disease called gray mold or botrytis. And again, it's usually the early shoots. Sometimes the blossoms are affected.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah, but clip it out and prune it out, get it away from it, and then typically the next shoots or blossoms are just fine because it's a little bit warmer and drier.
It's amazing to me how quickly things can go bad.
Yeah, I know. It is amazing.
Now, Leonard, you brought in a pot. Are those daffodils?
Those are daffodils, and I wanted to show a couple things with that. This is a good way. I like to pot some up and then put them in pots. Keep them in the ground for over winter. They get the cool, and then pull them out and put them in bigger pots. So it's like you have the instant color. But when they go by, the main thing with these, you want to let the foliage die back. So that's making the nutrients for next year in the bulb. I have to move some. So what I'm doing is exactly this. I'm going to have some construction, so I have to move them now. So I'm just potting them up. I'm going to let them die back. Then I'll know where they are. They're in these pots, and then I can plant them this fall. So if you don't want to do that, you can plant them in the bed they're going to. But if you don't have it ready, like I don't, then that's a good solution.
And they'll be fine in pots.
And they'll be fine in pots, yeah.
Now, your next tip is for everyone who loves hummingbirds, and who doesn't?
Exactly. You know, I just think it's so amazing. The migration, I look forward to them the 1st of May each year. And so we put out these hummingbird feeders, and I like the type like this that you can take apart and clean, because that solution gets icky after a while. You get all kinds of bacteria and dark, mold and things growing in. That'll make the bird sick. So you want to be able to unscrew it, take the parts off, and take these little parts and replace them and keep it clean. But in solution, you want to replace every few days, 3 to 5 days, depending on the weather. If it's hot, it's going often. And when you do that, clean it if you need to. And no food coloring. A lot of people think you have to have food coloring, but no, it's just they find a feeder just fine. And basically as simple as 1 cup of sugar to a quart of water. And I basically put the sugar in, add some water, heat it up so it dissolves a bit, and then I finish adding the water and then let it cool down before you put it out.
And so people often complain about ants climbing up into the feeders.
Exactly. I have mine on posts, and for some reason it's amazing how the ants know it's up there and they climb up the post. So I just use a petroleum jelly, like a Vaseline product here, and just put some, not on the top where the other birds land, but on the side of the post. When the ants get to it, they get stuck and they don't go further. So.
Good tip. Now, Anne, also, I think you have another example of some problems.
This is from a neighbor's yard. This is a lily, and it's, I don't have the adult lily leaf beetle, but these slug-like larvae are causing all this damage on this plant.
Black thing.
Yeah, they're really ugly, and they're actually interesting because they put their excrement on their backs.
Okay.
So, I think that's a defense mechanism, so birds won't eat them or whatever. But they're really doing a lot of damage on true lilies right now.
Yeah, that's a mess.
Yeah, and the adult is a bright red beetle, and you can use something like an organic insecticide like neem or Entrust.
And that will take care of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what else have you got?
Well, another thing that I'm seeing a lot of earlier in the spring is just winter browning on evergreens. On evergreens that typically have no problem with winter, but like balsams, we're seeing a lot of browning and dieback on junipers. So I'm telling homeowners, just clip it out, destroy it, watch the new growth. As long as it, there's probably going to be a lot of new growth, but just clip out the bad stuff and hope for a good, nice growing season.
Now, you say destroy it. What's the best way to just put it in a garbage bag?
Sure. Yeah. Or probably the best. You just don't want to drop it right next to the evergreen in case there is any fungal spores on there.
All right, well, I brought an example from my garden, and I only have one tomato plant, one cherry tomato plant. It's so sad. These were a couple of the outer leaves, and I noticed this Saturday when we were having that hot, windy weather, all of a sudden the leaves curled up, and I'm hoping it's just the heat as opposed to, tomato blight.
Right, exactly. None of the fungal leaf diseases are really active right now. It's still pretty early. So anytime you see dieback on the tomato, like from the edges or the lower older leaves, I don't worry about that. You can just pick them off as long as the growing point is growing well.
The rest of the plant looks great.
Yeah, exactly. So the plant will grow out of it. Pick those off if you want, but they'll be just fine.
That's interesting. And so, Leonard, is there anything else that you wanted to talk a little bit about?
Oh, exactly. There's, I thought we'd end with some beautiful plants here. Begonias. Now, there are different types of begonias. There, of course, the wax leaf, a lot of people know that are good for the sun, the lower plants, and then there are the tuberous type, like the nonstop, that are good for the shade. And these are actually tuberous types, too, that are becoming very popular in the last few years. They're Bolivian begonias. They're actually not that new. They were first found by an Englishman named Robert Pierce in 1864 in Bolivia and Argentina on the eastern slopes of the Andes, and he took them back to England, and actually in 1867 this was like the most popular plant at the International Horticulture Show in Paris, and so they've been around for a while. In fact, they were used to breed some of the early tuberous begonias, but these are newer varieties. This is an Encanto series, and you can see what's different. Two things. The flowers are kind of flaring, they're very narrow petals, and you can see they're kind of hanging. So they're great for hanging baskets, for containers. One plant like this will fill out a nice big container, and they have kind of narrow wings. They're called angel wing types. And you can imagine a 2-foot wide growing on the side of a hillside down in South America. And these are mainly reds and pinks and color variations, orange, of those. But there's a new series just out they call Bossa Nova series, and that actually has a white one too. So that's the Bolivian type, and then here's another version. This is the Angel Fall series here, this pink one. I'm kind of proud of that. I had it last year. Last fall I just put it in the cellar, once it died back in the fall, November, so put it in the cellar, left it, forgot about it, brought it out this spring, started watering it, and look what's happened. I mean, yeah, so these are great plants, and needs a little fertilizer, a little yellowish, but the way it's putting out. And then this is a newer type called a dragon wing type, just bigger leaves, but that's another new one. This is, these are a couple, we're going to have quite a few at the Waterfront Park this year down in Burlington on display of these new varieties of begonias.
Now, Anne, people are going to have questions throughout the gardening season. I know there's a website where you can submit questions.
Yeah, exactly. The Master Gardener program has a place on their website, and here's the address. It's www.uvm.edu/mastergardener, and you can go online and put in your question, and Master Gardener will get back to you within a day or two and give you an answer.
That's a wonderful resource.
Yeah, it is a great resource.
Now, in previous programs too, Leonard, you've talked about some of your bus tours this summer. What have you got coming up?
I have. Actually, we've got 3 tours. The first 2, unfortunately, for viewers, are full. But I do have one. It's about half full, and it's September. It's an overnight tour, September 14, 15, to Montreal, to the Botanic Gardens. And for the first time, we'll be doing an overnight then, so you can see the Chinese lanterns, which are world famous at the gardens by day and by night. And then the next day, we're going to the very famous, it's probably one of the largest in North America, Jean Talon Produce Market. They have hundreds of vendors, and it is just, it's amazing. Spend hours, see all kinds of stuff. You can actually buy quite a bit and bring back too. So that tour does have seats, and you can find out more on that and a lot of these topics on my website.
Which is what?
It's perrysperennials.com or .info. That'll Perry's Perennial pages, and I've got under the articles an article, fairly recent one I've just put up just on begonias, so you can read more about those there too.
And now, as the season gets underway, is there something that people, Anne, should be looking for in their gardens as far as, things that may be potential problems?
Well, it was interesting that Leonard brought all the begonias. I think these are a great replacement for the impatiens downy mildew that we've had that's shown up the last couple years.
Right.
So that's a plant that we're not being able to grow very well right now. So if people have put out impatiens, they might look for that disease to show up, and it'll wipe out their impatiens really quickly.
And that's the shade impatiens, not the New Guinea impatiens.
Exactly, exactly.
Which are the ones that grow in the sun, have the bigger leaves and
more so robust. These are a great. Some of these are a great
replacement. Now if you did have a problem with your impatiens in seasons past, should you plant in the same spot? Is it okay if you do a different plant in the same spot?
No, it's best to do a different plant, because the spore from that disease can last several years, and it'll just show up again as soon as the weather becomes cool and rainy. And it'll wipe out your plants very quickly.
And there's so many new things to try too, Leonard. I know you're always
There's
talking about
so many,
that.
and I think that's a good point Ann made too. These begonias all coming out, and that's one of the reasons they're breeding a lot of these new shade plants. There's some very good alternatives to the shade impatient. So it's opportunity to try new things. That's what I always do. If something doesn't make it for hardiness or culture or whatever I've done, I just find this opportunity to try something new.
Cross it off the list.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me today. It's always interesting to talk with both of you.
Thank you.
Great.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.